being somewhat okay or decent content creator is kind of like being Norwegian. You just pretend like you're not one and downplay yourself. Wait, do you have to pretend you're not Norwegian? That's sad. I think there should be some pride in being like it, but you don't have to like, yes, follow me. It's me. You know, like that, not on stream, that's TOS. What? Being positive about yourself or being a Norwegian? The sound of Jante login. Exactly, the essence of being Norwegian. Wait, but what does that mean? The law of Jante means that you're not supposed to big yourself up. That's fine. I think that's completely fine. I think it's really annoying when people do. But I think you should still be okay with like, not being like, yes, it's me, but being like, yeah, I do this. Not saying it just to promote yourself, just to make yourself bigger, but very much just be honest about it. Okay, law of Jante is terrible, but it's very much unspoken law growing up. You're not to think you are anything special, so you don't think you are good as we are. So you're not to think you're smarter than we are. You're not to imagine yourself better than we are. Not to think you know more than we do. You don't think you are more important than we are. You do not think you're good at anything, so you're not to laugh at us. You're not to think anyone cares about you. That sounds terrible. I agree with parts of that, but I feel like some of it's you're not to think you can teach us anything. But like sometimes you can, and like sometimes it doesn't come from a place of pride or a place of, you know, how do teachers feel? Wait a minute. How do teachers teach? We're like that. It kind of sounds like don't be arrogant and think you're as good as me. I think, but it sounds like the way you put it, Sarah, is that like literally on paper all it is? Do people say it like that? Is that like copy pasted? Because if that's something that they write down, written like that as that kind of list seems so oppressive. And I don't think it should be. I think to a certain level it is important to be like, don't be arrogant and think you're as good as me or even better than me. I think as good as me should be fine. I think ideally if everyone thinks they're equal to each other, that's the ideal. Is not thinking that you're worse, not thinking that you're better. And that's hard, but like everyone has something to offer. And I think in society we prioritize certain things being more important, but I think overall like different things will have different importance to different people. And people will be good at different things, and sadly some of those things aren't recognized by society as being important. That is something that I definitely don't think should be the way it is. I think there should be some more equality in the way that we think of people's abilities, but we don't joke about it. We just actually don't believe we were smart, even if we've done something really smart. Yeah, see, like that's problematic. I think that's problematic. I think you should be able to think that, oh, I did something good. Not like, yes, I'm the best. I did this. You know, like, oh, I was able to do this. That's it. The problem is that people many times do fall into arrogance, but I don't think that is taught properly either. I think the things that we teach in Scandinavia, school may be completely different, but at least in the US and Brazil, the ones that I experienced, the stuff that you learn doesn't apply to being a human. The stuff that you learn only applies to getting a job. You don't learn life skills. You don't learn how to do your taxes, for example. You don't learn how to do any of these things. And I think they should teach you, because if you're spending most of your day, you're not spending most of your day with your parents. Like, I think your parents should also teach you. But the fact that you spend most of your day in school and stuff, that's where you should be able to learn more about life, but you don't. That's what Jante said, word for word. In essence, it's still there, but not literal. Yeah, I don't like that. The law of Jante is a code of conduct from fiction, but in the Nordic countries, I think it's become like an attitude we have, highly rated to be humble and not brag. I think that's fine. Like, to that level, at least how I interpret to be humble and not brag, I completely agree. But the way that it was listed there, very oppressive. But that turns into, I should never think I'm anything good. See, I feel like that becomes an exaggeration. The way he put it feels like that, but I think it shouldn't go that far. In America, I bet they teach the kids the opposite of Jante login. That's like at least feeling I get speaking American to the American in my class. It's that thing too, they don't teach it. But what teaches that is everything else. Everything in the States is a competition in some way. The way things are graded, the way they put stuff up and like they talk about it, the way that your parents react to it, even the way many people, if you're just like living and working a job and that's what you're thinking about, you know, you're not thinking any deeply about, oh, is doing this job and I think like if you're just living, doing your job, doing the thing, you're not thinking about the system, you're not thinking deeper into any of these things. Your mind is very much, I need to be better so I can make more money, so that I can get more money and be better. But like it's kind of like circular logic, because why do you want more money? Oh, so that I can be better. But why do you want to be better? So I can get more money. You know, it's a little bit more nuanced than that, but really breaking it down to basics. And you start realizing that it just doesn't make sense, and that gets passed down to the kids. That's what they're told is important. And there's also like this big, in the US specifically, there's this big pride of like, yes, we conquered the world. We want to spread this to everyone because we did good. It's interesting because it's such an innocent way of seeing it. It's not like, yes, I will impose this on you. It's like, we want the world to be better, and therefore we want to share this with you. But I feel like from the outside, it's very imposing. But, you know, having lived there and having lived around America my whole life, when you dive deep into like why and how, that is absolutely not at all the mentality that's behind it. It's very interesting to see because it comes from a genuine place of wanting to see the world be a better place. But the way that they have been taught and shown a lot of it, and this isn't everyone, I'm just saying like, when you see that kind of sentiment, when you see that kind of attitude, most people, it comes from a genuine place of like wanting to make the place better. And that's, I think, where that entitlement comes from, because it's been instilled that that's the right way, that's the only way. No, but they, like, the way the American only teach American history and stuff like that, so self-centered, absolutely. But yeah, it's because of that. The generations of today have been fed their own propaganda for so long. If you learn US history, which I did, because I was in an American school, so I very much did, you realize that what America became post-war, like World War II, is what the propagandas said. They became that ideal. And that's where you get the like prim and proper 50s. And, you know, generations after that came off of that. If you think about the propaganda of that time from the US, that has become Americans. That is what they are now. And that's very interesting to see. Again, there's more nuance to that. I'm really like basing it down. That's why not just America, but I think it's so important to truly learn a different culture. And if you get to live in a different place, live there for an extended period of time, really understand how the people work. Because it doesn't need to be the US, but like, I think it gives you so much perspective just in general. I think it's so much worth it. Living in a different country just is a fantastic, especially one that's very different from yours culturally. I think it's a fantastic experience because of that. But they didn't do as good as they believe. For example, they didn't end World War II because they joined. Oh yeah, absolutely. But that's the thing. They were fed the propaganda. It's not real. Because no place is real in the ideology that they're feeding themselves. No place. Like, it doesn't matter how much you've done, how much you haven't done. No place is like that. It's artificial. I listened to Trash Taste podcast, which is like 3 anime/Japan YouTubers. They're not Japanese, but they moved to Japan, and one of them is married to like an American person. And they were talking about how when they first met, their spouse was very like, America. And they had never really lived outside. And they were like, yeah, the best food is, and I think they were from like the Midwest, somewhere like, I don't know, Wisconsin or something. And they're like, yeah, that's the best food. That's the best place to live. And just hearing them talk about how they changed throughout the years of living abroad is very interesting, because then you start to see that, you know, it doesn't come from a place of malice. Like I was saying, it's just how they've been taught. And then someone has an open mind, they're willing to see and realize that that's not quite the case. Americans that have left America at least once are automatically smarter than the majority of Americans. Honestly, I think that goes for everyone from everywhere. I think the way, and it's also the way we're thinking as well of what is good and what is bad. America fits into that perfectly, right? Because many places feel like that arrogance is bad. But I think every person from wherever you may be, getting to visit and live in a culture that's different than yours immediately will make you smarter and better if you're willing to learn. If you're closed, I'll be like, nah. If you're willing to learn and you're willing to be open to the differences, I think that increase in perspective is absolutely going to be positive for you, like in any way you put it. So not all it can be blamed on upbringing, though. The information is easily accessible for an inquisitive mind. And I do think that those that do, I think that those that are inquisitive are different. I think also like there is a big group of people in the States that aren't like that aren't arrogant, that aren't like that kind of like stereotypical like American image. But they're not like the loud speaking ones, right? You're not going to hear about that. And I think in general, and I'm not saying that that's what Vep is saying, we always tend to characterize people from a certain place in a certain way, independent of like how many different people there are in there. And there always are so many different types of people in a country, for example, right? But it's so much easier because it's overwhelming to be like, yes, let's analyze every different type of person. I wouldn't even say, at least from my experiences, and again, that's the thing, right? We all have limited experiences. We can't know everything. But I would say like, it's maybe like 50-50 of people that are that like classic American person, stereotypically American person, versus ones that don't necessarily think like that and question the whole thing that's going on. The lack of willingness to learn is clear from Brits on tour. They're so desperate to make wherever they go, just like Britain. It's the imperial nature taking it. And I guess that's where like the culture from America also came from before it was America, right? It came from Britain, who also had that mentality of like, yes, we take over, we're the best. And so like, it kind of is a continuation of that. Yeah, I'm ashamed of the amount of old Norwegians on the Spanish South Coast complaining about the Spaniards not speaking Norwegian. Wait, really? That's terrible. See, I genuinely think it's not necessarily like an American thing. It's not necessarily, it's people that are sheltered. That is the perfect word. It's people that are sheltered and they only know that culture and they can't fathom things being different. Sadly, it's not just old people. Like, although those that are like that and have become old, that has become much more ingrained. But that can happen to any age, right? I think it's just a human thing. At that point, in that way, it's just a human thing. I think the US sadly is in a place where that has been exacerbated into something much bigger. That's what they've become known for. I think there are a fair amount of sheltered people in every country. I just believe is higher in the US. I think it's because that's what you hear. And that's what they make fun of themselves for. Like, if you're making fun of your own people for that, it's usually not the people that are that. It's usually a group of people that see it from the, like, a different perspective. So even if you think about that, the fact that that's what you see a lot, especially in like older media, in social media, then yes, people that are like that are putting it out there. But I feel like even in movies, even in so many things, like American movies, that got made fun of, right? Again, I think there's always been a contingent of people that have always thought that was funny or weird, but as always, it's kind of worshipped, right? Because of all those things that we just talked about, like, you know, being seen as the best, being seen because of all of these things, all of this propaganda, blah, blah, blah. And so it's like, yeah, you can poke fun of it, but you can't be against it. And I think that makes it seem like everyone agrees with it, where a lot of people didn't, but they're not going to be like, you shouldn't do that type of thing. It's mostly from a certain generation and up. You'd be surprised. I went to a Christian school. I went to a Christian college, and there's a lot of young people that have that same mentality. So I don't think it's necessarily just a generational thing. I think it's stronger in a generation. But that's because of the environment, about what's happening around them, rather than it just being like, because yeah, the generation is a generation based on their environment. But I think that very much continues to exist. That is the part that I'd say is a human thing, right? Like, we have the ability to be that kind of person, but it depends on your environment, and it depends on what's going on. That makes either a generation more like that or less like that. As someone who has been like a month, 6 months outside, I now realize that did very little for me in terms of like changing my mind, learning about how other places work. I think it truly was only spending a few years out that I really started. And that was only to the States. Like, all of these trips that I went to were to the States. It was only multiple years of going to the same place, seeing the same people, that I started to realize all these things and be like, okay, what are the nuances of this? So you end up getting more of that surface level thing when it's a shorter trip. And I'm saying that from my own perspective. I'm not saying that everyone will happen the same way, of course, because people minds work differently, but like from my experience, like if you really start understanding a lot of these things better once you do it for a few years in one location. It doesn't need to be exactly the same location in a country, but I've been mostly in one area of the country, like the Northeast. Otherwise, you do just kind of get the more surface notes of it. I just find it very interesting where all of this comes from and how this came to be, and how like you can have such a different one. You were talking about the law of Jante and how culturally that can change how a whole population can act and be. And it's the same thing for Americans, but the other way. I just find that incredibly fascinating. But I think, again, it's something that can diminish the more you live outside, the more you travel and you experience something different, a different culture stuff. And again, if you're willing to learn, I feel like even if you're there to say spread your own truth or whatever, if you've lived there long enough, you come to realize more than that, unless you're very hard-headed. I think the more you live, because again, I don't think that 6-9 months is going to be enough. I think if you truly lived in a place for very long, you'd start realizing that things are not quite how they happen to be. Because in the example I was saying about like the podcast that I listened to, it was also years of living outside of the US that they said that they started changing how they felt about it, like years. So it's definitely not like a month's thing. But yeah, sorry for going onto this like cultural deep dive. I genuinely find it so interesting. That's why maybe I should have gone into this. I am fascinated about why people become the way they become and think the way they think outside of just themselves being, their own nature. I find it fascinating.